Before you hear my story, let me ask you something. What would you do if the person you loved most in this world humiliated you in front of everyone? What if you sacrificed your own dreams to build theirs only to be mocked and discarded like you never mattered? It stayed quiet for too long. But when I found out the truth, everything changed. Let me tell you how I went from being invisible to unforgettable. Don't forget to subscribe and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? My name is Helen Carter. I'm years old, widow, artist, grandmother. I've never had a big life, never needed one. I lived quietly in a modest little home in Montpelier, Vermont. My days were spent painting, listening to the wind, and thinking of the people I loved, mostly Madison. Madison is my granddaughter. I raised her like a daughter, really. My own daughter, Lauren, had her as she was overwhelmed, working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. So Madison spent her early years with me, finger painting in the kitchen, riding her tricycle in our cracked driveway, helping me pick dandelions for bouquets that wilted in jelly jars by the window. She used to call me Nana, not Grandma, not Granny, just Nana. When she was little, I watched her whole world. Years passed, she grew up, the world took over. iPads replaced storybooks, social media replaced those kitchen painting sessions, and I just stood, back, proud, but quietly heartbroken, watching her life drift into something I barely recognized. But I kept loving her. I never stopped. And for 12 years, I did something she never knew. Every month, I put aside whatever I could from my fixed income, birthday money, grocery savings, even skipped medications to build a college fund for her. I knew she wanted to go to CalArts, the big, shiny, expensive school in California that all the artsy kids dream about. Tuition insane, living costs worse. But I believed in her dream more than she did. Even though she'd stopped painting years ago, even though she never mentioned it anymore, even though she didn't really visit much unless she needed something, still I believed. And for her 18th birthday, I wanted to give her something more than money. I wanted to remind her of who she used to be, of who we used to be. So I painted her a gift. Not just a painting, a memory on canvas. I spent weeks on it. Every stroke was a heartbeat. I painted the old swing in our backyard, the one she loved when she was 5, the golden retriever we had, Max, who passed away when she was 10. The daffodils that bloomed outside her window every April, a soft watercolor sky above it all. I wrapped it carefully in brown craft paper and tied it with a white satin ribbon. Slipped a little card inside that said, "May your future be as bright as the little girl you used to be." I smiled as I placed it in the back seat of my car, heart full, hopeful. I imagined her face lighting up when she opened it. I imagined her hugging me, maybe even crying a little. I imagined wrong. The party was nothing like the birthdays used to throw for her. You know, backyard barbecues, cake baked from scratch, streamers hung with tape and love. No, this was glossy. Her mother, Lauren, had gone all out. White linen tables under a giant tent, a catered buffet, a DJ. Madison had a whole table just for her gifts, stacked high with fancy boxes and designer wrapping paper. Everything screamed money. Everything, except for me. I stood there in my old gray cardigan, clutching the painting like it was made of glass. No one really noticed I'd arrived. That was okay. I wasn't here for them. Madison wore a tight pink dress and heels higher than I could ever manage. She moved from table to table, laughing loudly, taking selfies, surrounded by friends who barely acknowledged me. Eventually, Lauren spotted me and forced a polite smile. "Oh, you made it," she said, like I was a distant cousin and not the woman who once changed her child's diapers. I handed her the gift and smiled gently. "Where should I?" "You can just put it with the others," she said, already turning away. But I didn't. Something told me to wait. I wanted to give it to Madison myself. I needed to. When she finally got around to opening the gifts, the crowd gathered. People recorded with their phones. She tore through boxes, designer bags, cash cards, AirPods. Then she reached mine. I saw her pause. My wrapping wasn't fancy. It was humble, handmade. "Oh, this one's from my Nana," she said, forcing a smile. She unwrapped the paper, opened the box, and held up the painting. Silence. Then came the laugh. "Are you serious?" she said, holding it up like it was a joke. "A painting? That's it? It must have been cheaper than buying a real gift." The kids around her snickered. Someone muttered, "Vintage vibes, I guess." Lauren gave me a quick, uncomfortable look, but said nothing. I stood frozen. My hands hung useless at my sides. "It's sweet, I guess," Madison added with ash shrug, propping it against the table leg forgotten decoration. Everyone moved on. No one saw my face. That's the thing about being invisible. No one notices when you're in pain. I turned and walked back to my car. Each step felt like I was dragging years behind me. Years of birthday cakes baked alone, years of scraped knees kissed better, years of whispered prayers over bills, just so she could have ballet shoes or paint supplies or summer camp. I sat in the driver's seat with the door closed and the engine off. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't sob. I just stared at my hands on the steering wheel, watching as a tear slid down and landed right on my wedding band. It was then I realized something. That painting was the most honest thing I had to give. And she didn't see it. None of them did. Not really. But I would never forget. When he got home that night, I didn't bother turning on the lights. I just walked into the kitchen, set my purse on the counter, and stood there in the dark. The silence of the house wrapped around me like an old friend. No laughter, no music, no voices telling me to smile more, no one asking if I was okay. I opened the cupboard, took out a chipped teacup, filled it with tap water, and sat down at the table where I used to help Madison with her homework, where she used to sit cross-legged, hair in a ponytail, asking me what colors to use in her drawings. I glanced toward the painting corner. The easel stood bare. The table beside it, cluttered with brushes and dried-out tubes of paint, sat untouched since the day I finished her birthday gift. That painting. It took me weeks of aching wrists and blurred vision, weeks of waking up at night because I thought of one more detail to add. She called it cheap it, and they all laughed. I stared down at my teacup. My reflection was barely visible in the ripples. Then I stood up, walked to the hallway, opened the drawer where I kept the folder labeled College Fund Madison. It was a thick folder stuffed with every document, receipt, and printout from the savings account I'd built slowly over 12 long years. Every deposit, every transfer, every small sacrifice. I'd skipped new clothes. I'd skipped haircuts. I canceled cable. Every time I put that money aside, I told myself, it'll be worth it. She's worth it. I turned on my old desktop computer, the one I barely used anymore, logged into the online banking portal, typed in my password, the same one I used since the day I opened the account for Madison. The balance blinked on the screen. Tos. I stared at it for a long time. I knew exactly how much every dollar cost me. Then I clicked transfer. Not to Madison, not to the college fund, to me, to my personal checking account. I watched as the progress bar moved slowly like it was waiting for me to change my mind, but I didn't. Not this time. Transfer complete. Balance. I closed the folder, shut the drawer, turned off the computer. No one needed to know. Not yet. I wasn't doing it out of spite, not revenge. It was something else. A quiet decision made in a storm of humiliation. For the first time in my life, I chose me. Not my daughter, not my granddaughter, not the idea of what a good grandmother should be, just me. He made a cup of tea the right way this time, warm with honey. I sat in the quiet, sipped slowly, and let the silence heal a tiny piece of me. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. The next morning, I was still unsure whether the night before had really happened. Is huffled into the kitchen, slippers scuffing against the linoleum, and stared at the computer like it was some kind of ghost. The bank account was real. The transfer was real. The money was in my name. Now not hers. I thought I'd feel worse, but I didn't. There was no guilt, just a strange, unfamiliar quiet in my chest. Not peace exactly, more like the absence of chaos. That same afternoon, I got a text. "Hi, Nana. Can I stop by today? Miss you." I stared at the screen for a long time. She hadn't called me Nana in months, maybe longer. I didn't answer right away. 2 hours later, there she was, Madison, on my porch with a tray of cookies from that expensive bakery downtown, the kind I could never afford but always admired in the window when we passed by. Her hair was pulled back, her makeup lighter than usual, her smile too bright to be real. "Nana," she chirped, wrapping her arms around me before I could even react. I stiffened. My body remembered the party, her voice echoing in front of her friends, her laughter stabbing like cold glass. But I let her hug me. She smelled like expensive shampoo and sugar. Nothing like childhood anymore. "I was just thinking about you," she said, walking into the kitchen like she used to when she was small. "I wanted to apologize for the party. I was just overwhelmed." I didn't mean what I said. She sat at the table, folded her hands. Her nails were perfect. Her phone glowed softly in her lap. "I shouldn't have said that about the painting. It was really sweet of you. It's actually beautiful." I nodded, slowly, trying to read the expression on her face. Was it real? I wanted it to be real. "I missed you," she added. "I know I haven't been around. Things got busy, but I'm here now." She took my hand across the table. Her eyes shimmered, almost like tears. "I've been thinking a lot about college," she said quietly. "About Cal Arts. I know the fund is, complicated now, but I just want to be close to you again. I'm not here for the money, Nana. I swear I miss us." The words wrapped around me like ivy, soft, familiar, dangerous. I felt something loosen in my chest. Maybe she was growing. Maybe the shame at the party had awakened something inside her. Maybe I had been too harsh. After all, she was young. "Stupid, we've all been that. I'll think about things," I told her gently. "But I'm glad you're here." She smiled. The big one. The same smile from when she was 7 and used to draw me pictures of rainbows and write, "I love you, Nana," in shaky crayon. We ate cookies. She stayed. For dinner. She helped wash the dishes and asked about my latest painting. She even brought up a few childhood memories. The swing, Max, the daffodils. My heart began to believe again, to soften. Later that night, I opened the college fund folder again. I didn't transfer anything, but I thought about it. I thought about it more than I wanted to admit. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe she'd learned something. Or maybe I just wanted her love so badly, I was willing to be wrong. I didn't sleep well. My mind kept replaying her voice. "I'm not here for the money, Nana, is where." And yet the only thing louder than her words was the echo of that birthday party, that laugh, that cheap shot. But I pushed the doubt down, buried it deep, because sometimes you'd rather believe a lie that feels like love than accept a truth that leaves you alone. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I found out. The kind of day where nothing feels important enough. To pay attention, cloudy, quiet, ordinary. Madison had come over that morning with her laptop and a smile, said she needed help printing a scholarship form. I'd been the techie of the family since the 9s, even if now I could barely update a phone. She left after lunch in a rush to meet friends. I stayed in the kitchen, washing the few dishes we used, humming a little tune from an old jazz record Webbuth used to love. I remember thinking, maybe this is healing. Maybe we're really rebuilding something. Then I went into the study. Her laptop was still there, open, humming softly, screen still glowing. I was going to close it, just click it shut, and send her a text, but the screen caught my eye. There was a chat window open, a messaging app I didn't recognize. At the top it read, Madison chatting with Emmy. My gut told me to look away, but something deeper, something primal, something protective told me to read. The last message hit me like a slap. Don't worry, she's falling for it. I've been sweet, cried, a bit. Told her I missed our bond. Classic emotional bait. She always melts with that family crap. My hands trembled. Another message blinked below it. Fresh and ruthless. Just need a couple more visits. She's already thinking about putting the fun back. I know it. Told you. She's predictable. I'll be in CalArts by fall. Manifesting. I stared at the words. They weren't just cruel. They were calculated. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a plan. Everything. The visits. The hugs. The stories about Max and the daffodils. Every tear, every cookie was a script written to manipulate me. I didn't know how long I stood there. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. My legs finally carried me to the sofa, and E sat down slowly, laptop still open on my lap, the words blaring like neon signs. Her voice, her sweetness, every Nana, I missed you, played in my head like a broken record, and every single one sounded faker, now than the last. I felt cold, like someone had turned off the sun. How did I not see it? How did I fall for it again? I looked at her messages, peppered with emojis and exclamation points, like they weren't even written by the girl I raised. She sounded like a stranger, worse, a predator, targeting my emotions, manipulating my heart, using love as a weapon. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. Instead, I closed the laptop slowly, like shutting a casket. The grief was real, but this time, it wasn't grief for a person I'd lost. It was for a person who never really existed. The version of Madison in my head, the sweet, curious child with paint on her cheeks who once told me I was her best friend. That girl was gone. Maybe she'd been gone for longer than I realized. I sat in silence for the rest of the day, letting it sink in. This wasn't just disappointment. It was betrayal. And it wasn't accidental. It was intentional. I walked to my painting corner later that evening, pulled the cloth off the canvas she had mocked at the party. There it was, our story in brushstrokes, the old swing, the dog, the daffodils, and all I could see now was what she had called it. Cheap. But for me, it was never about price. It was about memory, about effort, about love. And I finally understood something. She hadn't rejected the painting, she had rejected me. I whispered to the canvas, my voice steady this time. You're not the one who's worthless, and neither am I. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I just sat in my old rocking chair in the living room, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The house dark, except for the faint yellow glow of the porch light leaking through the curtains. It was strange how quiet pain could be. How it didn't always scream. Sometimes it just sat beside you, breathing in sync, waiting for you to acknowledge it. I kept hearing her voice in my head over and over. She always melts with that family crap. I thought of all the times I had melted. When Lauren slammed doors and called me overbearing, I let it go. When Madison started visiting less, I convinced myself she was just busy. When I was forgotten on holidays, I baked cookies and dropped them off anyway. I melted because love made me soft, because I believed in forgiveness, in loyalty, in second chances. But now I saw it for what it was, survival. I had spent a lifetime sacrificing pieces of myself so no one would leave. I gave until there was nothing left, and then I gave more. And for what? So my granddaughter could laugh behind my back so I could be manipulated into handing over my life savings like some gullible, lonely old woman. I felt rage that night. Not loud rage, not destructive. It was a quiet, focused kind of rage. The kind that sharpens you, that peels the wool off your eyes and shows you who you've become and who you're done being. Around a.m., I got up, walked to the painting she called cheap, and stood in front of it for a long time. The memories on that canvas no longer hurt. They weren't bruises anymore. They were proof. Proof that I had loved, that I had given my best, that I had been real even when they weren't. I whispered, "You're not going into a closet, not anymore." And I meant it. I turned to my bookshelf, pulled out an old camera I hadn't used in years, and took a picture of the painting. Then I sat down at my desk, turned on my computer, and typed. It found an online group for older women artists, a quiet corner of the internet where people posted their work, shared stories, encouraged each other. My fingers trembled slightly, but I uploaded the photo. In the caption box, I wrote, "This painting was called Cheapy Someone I Love, but it was painted with everything I had left. Every brushstroke is a memory. Every color, a piece of my heart. Maybe it's not enough for some people, but it was everything Tome." I hit post. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few likes, a kind comment or two, but it wasn't about attention. It was about finally using my voice, not just my brushes, to tell the truth. I left the computer on and went back to the living room, made tea, sat in silence, and for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel invisible. I felt awake. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was already filtering through the curtains, casting long golden lines across the floor. My tea from the night before sat cold on the end table, untouched. I stretched, my body stiff, but strangely energized, like something inside me had shifted. Is huffled over to the computer, not expecting much. Then I saw it. The screen was glowing, with notifications, likes, comments, shares. I blinked. The painting I posted, that painting had caught fire overnight. Not just a spark of sympathy. No, people were seeing it, really seeing it. I clicked into the comments. This made me cry. There's so much emotion here. Whoever called this cheap doesn't know what love is. Do you sell prints? I want this hanging in my home. Please tell me you're exhibiting somewhere. My heart pounded. I felt flushed, dizzy even. I scrolled further. Messages had started pouring in. Direct messages from strangers, women mostly. Women who were mothers, grandmothers, daughters, women who said they saw themselves in my story, that they'd been called too sentimental, too giving, too soft. But this painting, it was power. And then one message stood out. "Hi, Helen. I'm curator for a small gallery in Brooklyn. Your piece stopped me cold. Would you consider exhibiting it? We'd be honored." I read the message 3 times. Brooklyn, a gallery. I looked back at the painting, still leaning quietly against the wall near the dining room, half in shadow. The swing, the dog, the daffodils, my memories made public. My hurt turned into something beautiful. I answered with trembling hands. Yes, I'd be honored too. Within hours, more messages arrived. Art magazines, influencers, a woman from a major platform asking if I would do a feature story. It was like I had thrown a tiny stone into a still lake and somehow triggered a tidal wave. Later that afternoon, the curator from Brooklyn called me. Her name was Dana. She said she wanted to fly in to pick up the painting herself. "I want to treat this piece with the care it deserves." She told me, "It's not just art. It's Astri people need to hear." She asked about the title. I hesitated. Then smiled. Call it The Rejected Gift. Dana paused, then said, "Perfect." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and let it wash over me. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Madison anymore. It was about me reclaiming the parts of myself I had given away too freely. It was about taking what they dismissed and turning it into something untouchable. That night, I didn't just sleep. I dreamed of color, of light, finally being seen. 2 weeks later, I stood in the middle of a sunlit gallery in Brooklyn. My hands shaking as people moved around me, murmuring, studying, pausing longer than I ever thought they would. My painting hung on a clean white wall, framed simply, lit softly. It looked powerful, not because of technique or style, but because of the story behind it, my story. The Rejected Gift, the placard read, by Helen Carter. I must have stared at that little sign for 5 full minutes. Dana, the curator, came up beside me. "We had over 300 people at the opening," she whispered. "It's the most attention we've gotten all season." I blinked, stunned. She smiled. "And there's more." She led me to her office in the back, a quiet little space filled with sketches and portfolios. On the desk was a printed mail. A private collector in Manhattan wanted to buy the piece, $20,000 cash. I stared at the number. It didn't feel real. Dana watched my expression. "You don't have to sell it," she said softly. "But if you do, this could fund a new studio, travel, materials, whatever you want. You've got something rare, Helen. Voice and heart." My lips trembled. For so long, I had thought my voice didn't matter, that my heart was a burden, that all I was a vessel for other people's dreams. But there now, my pain had value. My truth had worth. I nodded. "Tell him yes." We sealed the deal that day. I signed my first artist's contract, my hand barely steady enough to hold the pen. Dana insisted on taking a photo of me in front of the painting before it left the gallery. "Smile like you. Mean it," she said, and I did. For the first time in what felt like years, I really meant it. Back home in Vermont, things were different. Lauren called once out of the blue just to say she heard my painting was getting attention. No apology, no congratulations, just curiosity. I didn't give her the details. And then Madison showed up. She hadn't called, just knocked on the door one afternoon with a tired expression and tear-glossed eyes. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside, let her in. We sat at the same kitchen table where she used to eat cereal in her pajamas, where I'd once helped her build science projects out of cardboard and glue, where she used to tell me I was her favorite person in the whole world. She folded her hands and looked at me with the same face I'd watched grow for 18 years. "I saw the painting," she said. "Online people are talking about you about it." I said nothing. She hesitated. I wanted to say sorry again. I raised my eyebrows for the birthday party, for that and for everything else. Still, I said nothing. She looked down. Her hands were fidgeting now. She wasn't crying, just waiting. I messed up, Nana. I was stupid and selfish. I took you for granted, but I want to fix things. I leaned back, arms folded. "What do you mean, fix things?" "I mean," she swallowed, "I still want to go to Cal Arts. And maybe if things are different now, maybe you could." There it was. The truth, bleeding through the apology. Still chasing the money, still chasing me. But now, I wasn't chasing back. I stood up. She looked up at me, confused. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply said, "You called my love cheap. You pretended to care because you thought I'd fund your dream again. You treated me like a transaction." She opened her mouth, but I held up my hand. "You lost something that day. Madison, not just money. You lost the one person who believed in you no matter what." I walked to the door, opened it. "You want something from me, Agan? Earn it." She stood slowly, lips pressed into a thin line, pride wounded. I didn't expect a hug, didn't get one. She left without another word. I watched her walk down the porch, back to her car, back to whatever story she'd built, to convince herself she deserved it all, and I went back inside alone. But finally, whole. A week passed after Madison walked out of my house without saying goodbye. I didn't hear from her, not a text, not a call. And you know what? I didn't expect to. For the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt. It felt clean, like a space being cleared for something better. Then one morning, while I was sipping coffee on the porch, Lauren showed up. She didn't even knock, just barged in like it was still. And I was watching Madison after daycare. Her heels clicked angrily against the wood floors. Her hair was perfect, her blazer stiff, and her expression sharp. I just came from Madison's. She said, "No, hello?" I took another sip, waited. She's crying. She says you humiliated her, that you made her feel like trash, that you're throwing her away over a painting. I said nothing. She told me about the money, about the college fund. She said you took it back without warning. Still, I stayed quiet. I let her talk. Lauren threw her hands up. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're sacrificing her future. You're punishing her for being young and stupid, for making one bad joke at a party. At that, I stood slowly. I walked to the counter, picked up the thick folder labeled College Fund Madison, and held it up. This, I said, voice calm, is 12 years of my life. Every coupon clipped, every doctor visit skipped. Every winter, I kept the heat low to save $50. This folder is my sacrifices. And she spat on it. She was upset. No, I interrupted. She was cruel. And then she came back and played Niceto Get It Back. She didn't apologize. She performed. And I almost fell for it. Lauren crossed her arms. So what now? You let her dreams fall apart? I looked her in the eye. She's 18. She's not 5. If her dreams are real, she'll fight for them, work for them, not manipulate a woman who loves her. Lauren's face flushed with guilt, anger. I couldn't tell. I raised you better, I said softly, and I raised her better, but somewhere along the way, you both learned how to take and forgot how to give back. Lauren looked away. I walked to the desk, pulled out a new folder, and set it down. This one was labeled in fresh black marker, Fundo de Libertad, Helen Carter. I'm using the money now, not on anyone else, on me. She stared a tit. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound. Came out. I gave you both decades, I said. Now I'm taking a few years back, Lauren finally whispered. You really won't pay for Cal Arts. No, I said, without hesitation. I already paid in full with everything I had, and you threw it away. She left in silence. And I poured another cup of coffee. My hands didn't shake this time. They say, when one door closes, another opens. But sometimes it's not about doors. Sometimes it's about the walls crumbling down so you can finally see the sky. A few days after Lauren stormed out, I received an email from an editor at the New York Chronicle. She'd read about the gallery exhibition, seen my painting, and wanted to feature me in a piece titled Late Bloomers, Women Who Found Their Voice After. I laughed when I saw the subject line. Late bloomer, maybe. Or maybe I'd always had something to say. I'd just been talked over too many times to hear myself. The interview was over the phone. The editor was warm, curious, and kind. She asked about the painting, the meaning behind it. My journey as an artist. I told her everything, not about Madison by name. I wasn't there to expose, just to tell the truth. My painting was dismissed, I said. Not because it lacked value, but because the person it was meant for didn't recognize love when it was right in front of her. She was quiet for a moment before responding. That's going to resonate with a lot of people. The article went live 2 days later. It exploded. Messages poured in from women across the country, grandmothers, mothers, even young women who said they saw their futures in my past and wanted to change direction before it was too late. I was invited to speak at a virtual conference for women over. A publishing company emailed about a possible memoir. My email inbox became a garden of courage and confessions from strangers who felt like sisters. And then came the call, Paris, an art collective that worked with female artists from around the world, wanted to feature the rejected gift in a traveling exhibit across Europe. They would fly me out, cover everything. Your story is exactly what this world needs right now. the woman on the line said, her French accent soft and reverent. After I hung up, I sat still for a long time. I wasn't just seen, I was heard, and not for being someone's mother or grandmother, for being Helen. That night, I walked into my studio and pulled out a blank canvas. I didn't paint Madison. I didn't paint the swinger Max or the daffodils. I painted a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, arms stretched wide, wind in her hair, looking out over a vast horizon with no fear in her eyes. I titled it Freedom. I hung it in the hallway, right where the college fun folder used to be, because this life, this peace, this power was the education I had been denied. But I earned it anyway, brushstroke by brushstroke, breath by breath. The world doesn't always make sense. It doesn't always reward the good people, the kind people, the people who give everything they have to others. I used to believe that. I used to believe in fairness, in the idea that if you did enough for others, something good would come back to you eventually. But that wasn't true. At least it hadn't been for me. Not until now. Paris was a dream. I walked into that gallery on the sand like I was a different person, like I had never known rejection, never known silence. The city, the lights, the people, all of it was so much brighter than I had ever imagined. The artists around me were young, beautiful, energetic. They had the kind of futures I used to dream about for myself a lifetime ago. But that wasn't the life I wanted anymore. I didn't need the bright lights to tell me I was worthy. I was worthy in my own right. And when my painting was finally revealed to the audience that evening, I watched them stop, silent, staring. Some teared up, some stood unmoving like they were trying to absorb every drop of emotion I had put into that canvas. I wasn't just showing my art to them. I was showing me. I had never known how much it could hurt to finally be seen, to finally be recognized for something I'd always given so freely. The love, the sacrifice, the pieces of myself I'd buried so others could rise. But when I walked into that gallery, no one expected me to be anything but myself. Later, as I stood by my painting, the same one Madison had mocked, I received more offers, more invitations. A major gallery in London wanted to feature my work. A woman from an art collection in Australia said she wanted to include my pieces in an exhibit on female empowerment. I was invited to speak at more events, share my story, share my art. The emails flooded in, the calls came non-stop, and in each one I heard something new. Your story matters. Your voice is important, but none of it mattered as much as the next moment. One evening after the show in Paris, I walked along the river, the city lights twinkling in the distance. It felt surreal, like a dream, one I never thought I could touch. I sat down at a small cafe alone, a small glass of wine in front of me, a slice of bread on the table. The world seemed so vast, and yet I was no longer small. I was no longer the quiet woman in the background, blending into the shadows. I was Helen Carter, an artist, a creator, a woman who finally understood her own worth. And in the stillness as the night settled around me, I finally felt at peace. I hadn't just broken free from Madison, from Lauren, from the world that had made me feel invisible. I had broken free from myself, the self that thought she wasn't enough, the self that had let everyone else take. I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. When I flew back to Vermont, everything was different. The house felt like a new place, lighter, brighter. I began working on a series of new paintings. Each one reflected the growth I had experienced, the emotional healing. I painted women, not just the soft, nurturing versions I had always been. These women were strong, bold, fierce. Some were standing tall in front of mountains, others with their arms raised to the sky, unafraid to be seen. I was no longer the woman who stayed quiet, who allowed herself to be forgotten. I wasn't invisible anymore, and neither was my art, but the true gift, the real freedom. It came when I took my place in this world without hesitation, without apology. I was finally the woman I had always been meant to be, and that was priceless. I'd been back from Paris for a few weeks now, and everything had changed. Not just in the world around me, but within myself. The emails still flooded in. Thaffers kept coming. Art collectors, galleries, press outlets, all asking for a piece of me. Of my story, of my art. It was surreal. And yet somehow it all felt so right. But I didn't chase the fame. I didn't chase the recognition. What mattered now wasn't the applause or the money. It was the quiet moments I got to spend in my own skin, unburdened, unapologetic, and finally, peace. One evening, I stood on the porch of my home in Vermont, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The landscape stretched out in front of me, fields, trees, the small creek running through the property. The wind carried the scent of pine, and the world felt alive. Alive in a way it hadn't in years. I had no idea where Madison was now. I had stopped asking. Lauren hadn't called. Maybe they were still angry. Maybe they were still upset that I wasn't the woman I used to be. The one who gave everything without question, without ever asking for anything in return. But that woman was gone, and in her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. I painted every day now. I didn't think about Madison anymore. When I picked up my brush, I thought about what came next. I painted women with open arms, standing tall, gazing into the unknown with no fear in their eyes. And when I finished those paintings, I didn't just display them in my studio. I shared them with the world. They spoke to the hearts of women who, like me, had been silenced or overlooked. Women who had lived their lives in the shadows of others, who had been told that their love wasn't enough. That was the moment I realized what had happened. I had given my heart away for years without realizing I was the one who needed to be seen. The most unexpected thing happened that day when I received a letter in the mail, a small envelope with a simple return address. Madison's name written in careful, familiar script. My chest tightened as he tore it open. I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't heard from her in months. The letter was short. Nana, I can't undo the hurt I caused you, and I'm not asking for anything. I've been working on myself, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I do want to say I'm sorry. I've been selfish, and I regret how I treated you. I hope one day you'll see me differently. Love, Madison. I read it twice, the words sinking in slowly. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. I had let go of the pain, of the expectations, of the years of trying to hold on to something that was never meant for me to carry. I took the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in the drawer with a college fund folder that had once consumed my life. The money was gone, but the weight was gone too, and with it any need for validation from anyone but myself. I spent the next few months traveling. I went to Europe again. This time, top places I'd never imagined I would visit. I saw new things, met new people, and found beauty in everything. I laughed more, I loved more, and I painted with a freedom I had never known. One afternoon, as I wandered, through an art market in Spain, I met a man, a kind man. His name was Thomas. Name? He was an artist too, older than me, with a gentle soul and an appreciation for life's small moments. We talked 4 hours about art, about loss, about love. There was no rush, no pressure, just 2 people talking openly, honestly. We saw each other a few more times. We talked about the lives we had lived and Theon's we wanted to live now. He wasn't looking for someone to complete him, and neither was I. But together, we found something that felt real. It wasn't about filling a void. It was about creating something beautiful from what was already there. And when we parted, I didn't feel lonely. Not anymore. Because I knew deep down, that I had everything I needed. Not in anyone else, but in myself. Back in Vermont, I stood in Front of the canvas I had been working on for months. It was a portrait of a woman, older, but with strength in her eyes, her arms stretched wide as if embracing the world, fully alive, fully present. There were no restrictions on her, no shame, no guilt, just peace. I titled it Freedom because that's what I'd finally found. It was mine, all of it, and it was priceless. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.